Hey guys, it's Eric here, and believe it or not, even though it's very bright here, I did not die and go to heaven. It's just the sun outside right on the windows over here behind me. So that's why everything is white. Hopefully in this recording you guys can see me at least. So this is maybe not the final episode on our road to Eden. We have gone through all the different editions of Mutant, and now we have finally come to the place where we're supposed to go, which is to talk about Mutant Year Zero. I own the Swedish copies of the game. I don't own the English ones. So I'm going to primarily talk about the the Swedish version, and how I think that probably the English version is going to be in comparison, because it's going to be the same rules. There will be just some differences between the world. There might be some differences when it comes to the meta plot, maybe small ones, but I think the general thing will be more or less the same. Right, so let's get straight to it. Back in 2014, they released this guy. I'm trying to so you guys can see it without the reflection, because it still has plastic on. So this is the first edition Mutant box. I've shown it before. That they released. I haven't opened this one, but it contains all the things you need to play the game in the classic, box form that the Swedish guys love so much to do. I forgot to say, I'm going to talk about the meta plot, so if you don't want me to spoilerific your day, I'm going to make a warning tag whenever I start talking about it. I'm going to try to talk about the games and then the meta plot and then have a summary. So I'm going to try and make so you know when I'm starting to talk about that. Okay, so they released the main box back in 2014. And it was immensely popular, which meant that it sold out really quickly. So they had to do some kind of half solution to the problem. Enter these books. They are the rule books from the box. So you had to get 2 books. And you didn't get any of the mutation cards or the threat cards or the special dice that you need to play the game. You don't need them, but it's cooler to have the special dice. And I'm going to show you guys what they look like. Because a couple of years later, this one came out, which is the next big box that they made. It's very thick. We'll put it over here. It's very thick. And inside of it you have, and it's kind of brilliant, but I also have to put up some criticism. I think they probably have already gotten some critique about this, is that you have... just need to pick up everything. You got all your cards. I guess this is like this is the second edition, so they have actually gone through the rules and improved stuff and things like that. So you have your artifact cards and mutation cards and all that cool stuff. Yeah, threat cards. And I want to show you guys the dice. The green, the yellow, and the black. They are just D6s with a different marker on number 6. It's just, still, it's kind of cool, that you have the radioactive and then you have one explodey on one of the ones. You're right, and we have a biohazard on one of the ones over here too. There's a reason for it, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Just picking everything up. So, this is what I would like to point out first, is that, yeah, you got the rule books. You have the Gamer's Handbook and the Game Master's Handbook. So, they look like that. And here's the full version. This is a problem. These are a light edition, get started version, and they refer back to these books that are like the main rule books. That's kind of a big no-no when you think about it, because this box costs more than the main game. the original game, as far as I remember, and with these, and these I think went for about $25 or $30. No, $30 to $35 each, and this one about $60. So that's like $120 just to be able to have the full rule set. Big freaking miss on what I consider it to be. I'm just going to put everything back here. You also got some maps with the game, which is really cool, and some markers. But that was also in the first edition, so not a big miss. They also added in the Swedish version there are 3 zone compendiums. I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. There's 6 of them. In the English version, there's 3 so far as I checked at least. So I'm going to talk about them too. Now, the game has gone from the wonderful BRP rules, which I love. They are my favorite rules. I forgot I was supposed to show some more stuff here. So I love the wonders of BRP, but that's because I've always used the BRP rules. These rules are a bit more modernized, I would say. And they use kind of like, I like to call it a little bit like the, what should I call it? I like to call them Vampire the Masquerade rules, because they use, alright, so here's a character sheet. It's in Swedish now, so you guys have to bear with me, and you have the dice. So over here is your main attributes, rated 1 to 5, and that gives you, whenever you do a check, they're yellow, so it gives you the specific amount of yellow dice. And then you have your skills down here, they are green dice, and then you might have some, let's see now, where is it, like some equipment or things like that might gain you additional black dice. These are the ones that you use and you roll for successes. Sounds familiar? It kind of is. That's one of the things I'm not the biggest fan of that, but I still find it cool. I do like the fate rules where you use dice pools and things like that. So there's nothing wrong with this in itself. It's just a different set of rules that I'm used to. Also, I just wanted to show this. It's such a wonderful picture by Simon Stålenhag. He's a great artist. They really chose the right guy to draw it, and I mean, the Tales from the Loop, it's incredible when it comes to the art. I haven't played the game, I haven't checked it so much. Now, I would call this edition, or these editions, whatever, maybe I should use the campaign books instead of the big hulking box here to point out everything. So, I would say that, well, I would say it. This I would call basically a reimagining of Mutant. It ties back to the previous edition and the absolutely first edition. It's in the same setting. And I like that, because the one that I consider to be the best was the previous edition, the one made by the Iron Ring. And many of the Iron Ring guys actually went over to work for the Free League after the Iron Ring closed up. So you can see their hands a little bit here and there in the creation of the game. The difference is that the first edition was, I can't remember exactly, like in the beginning of the 110s of the Pyrisamfundet, which I talked about previously. The previous edition was about a little bit before 100. This one is relatively close to the catastrophe. It doesn't give you an exact year. There is some hints at which year it is. So it should be about maybe 200 years, maybe. I'm guessing now, I'm just spitballing now. About 200 years, perhaps, maybe more, before the creation of Pyri. The Pyrisamfundet. So, something like that. In the next version of the game, which was this one, you guys might recognize because it looks exactly the same in the English version as it does the Swedish one. In this one, it actually mentions exactly what time it is, which year it is. But now I can't remember due to that, just looking at it. So, but what's the story? And I'm not going into meta yet. The story is very simple. You, as a player character. Sorry, I'm starting to mix languages here. The player characters are one of many people living in what is called an ark. They are mutated people, so mutated humans. They live in an ark, which is basically any kind of larger base that they have found and settled. So they are kind of like colonizing. So the colonization has begun. Civilization is starting to work once more. And they are led by the elder, or the eldest. But the eldest has started to become really old and starting to get sick. There are no children being born amongst the chosen people. So that's a problem. And that's basically where we start, because there are rumors about something called Eden. And Eden can save all of us in one way or another. I just wanted to show you. So that leaves us with one of the maps. This is a map of, I guess this is previously Gothenburg. On the other side there's the Stockholm area. There's also one over Malmö and some other parts of the country. And in the English version there's one map over, I think, London and one over New York. So you can start out with a map like this, or a completely blank one. And you have map coordinates up here and down there. So you have squares. Each square is like one session. So you have so many combinations that you can use. And places for the characters to visit. And I really like the idea that you have this and you can build your entire world. There's no specific culture or nations that decide anything. It's more free-form in that way, that it kind of falls into with the Fate idea of gameplay, like less rules, more world creation together with the GM, rather than the GM is like, this is the world, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. While here it's like, well, you create your character, then you create, I think it's one or two additional characters, one that they care for, might be a relative or a very good friend, and one they don't like. And these people become settlers within the arc and can be important plot devices to be used. As you know, I think it was the rules book, just the rules. I'm just going to put it here. As you know, this one has some really interesting ideas. There's some rules and more information about the world and different like monsters and how to be a GM and stuff like that. Different threats, but it gives you adventure seeds. Like I never liked these things anyway. Tables, random encounter tables, but they do fill a purpose. These are different threats or things that can happen inside or outside the arc to create a session. So it's a good idea, and they are then described on the following pages. Some of them are important for the meta plot. Some are just, well, to create the world and all that stuff. It's all from like a caravan of merchants show up, or even like unmutated humans might show up. Things like that. They are kind of sparse on exactly what has happened, but it goes with the theme of this game, because they play characters in the age of 20 to 30. They have always lived in the Ark area. They haven't seen the outside world. They don't know anything specific. Only mythological ideas told by the oldest. So that's it. There's also some settings about you need to like develop your Ark with more technology, more food, more water. It's always consumed. You need to find more and more and more, or create your own like greenhouses, or find a good water source that doesn't contain any contaminants that might turn people into zone monsters and things like that. There's a chapter on monsters. Let's see now, what more is there? There's some fun stuff here. They actually have like the entire starting area in here and some suggestions on how to start your game. They even give you an arc in this one that is really cool. I think it's like an old ferry boat that you can use, amongst other things. Let's see now. There is more information, but that goes under the meta plot, which I won't be talking about right now. There are some other cool stuff. There's mentions of like let's see now, like slavery. There's one. What's it called? They talk about one arc. I think they only call it the second arc. Yeah, the second arc, which is mostly just women. And it turns out that there's a man, I think it's psionically gifted human, who leads all and has created a harem for himself so he can create his own master race, so to speak. All the men are slaves, and when they can't work anymore, they kill them and eat them. Things like that. That's really dark when you think about it, because the previous edition and the first edition was kind of cute with fluffy animals and stuff like that. Here's like, well, we have even like the vehicular people, like the Mad Max people. We have cannibals. There's a group called the Nova Cult, who lives in a nuclear bunker with a nuclear missile that they pray to. And I think they are like the proto Iron Ring that shows up in later Zone compendiums. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Zone compendiums. So I'm going to pick up, because I don't own all of them, but I own quite a few. Well, I own 3 of them. 2 of them are available in English, and I own those 2, but the 3rd one I don't own. So the first one looked like this. It's a Game Master screen and then a small leaflet. And this one expands on the weird cult ideas, and it talks about sunken cities, I think. Yeah, it talks about Malmö, for example, like the watery great things. So, I mean, this one is not really relevant for English-speaking people because it's so specific to one region. There's also the cannibal people who lives an incestual life and marry each other and have children. Weird shit like that. But I think this one is one that you might recognize. It's called, let's see now, I need to check here. It's called Lair of the Saurians. This one has the same name in Swedish as one of the adventures from the adventure modules from the first edition. I think I called like similar name. It was like the reptile people's clutches, something like this. This one talks about ships and whoop, I forgot. It's on the inside. There's a freaking large map of the entirety of Scandinavia, as far as they know from rumors and everything. Which, if you're done with like the main campaign, you might want your characters to, for example, if they're over here, which is like Stockholm, and you want them to be able to explore more of the world, you have the entirety here. Like one of these little squares are supposed to be like one entire map. I would say maybe 4 of them together would be one of the full maps, more or less. This one talks actually about the Saurians, and that's a cool adventure, as long as you have also the Oracle that you can find is also a cool idea. And the Females Collective. But here's something that I found out that was really interesting. I don't know if it's in the English version, but one of the adventures here are called The Hordes of the Hydra. The Hydra was important in the previous edition because it was part of the meta plot. The Hydra was a great mutated monster that secretly ran, I think it was like psionically gifted and weird like blobby tentacled mass that secretly ran the entire Pyrisamfundet. And the entire meta plot of that game is to find out about the Hydra and the truth about the Hydra, and either beating it or coming to some kind of like deal with it. So, and here is like the beginning of the Hydra. So that was a really freaking cool idea. And here but they are really not true yet. But this one follows a bit like the previous edition. The fluff from the previous edition. Even though at the end of the main campaign here, there's also mentions of the Hydra, but the Hydra is then characterized as I think like an 8-foot tall human, but still like this super conquering Genghis Khan creature that just kills everything in its way, and so on. Here it is the same thing, but it's a monster of some kind. Then there's that was the two first one. Then you have Dead Blue Sea, which I don't own because, well, not to sound silly or anything, it was just that it's Waterworld as far as I understand it, and it didn't really interest me, so I don't own that compendium. But if I do, I'll probably buy it because I want to complete my collection. Oh, that was the gamer's book. And then you have, that's the third one. Then you have the fourth, which is the third in the English version, called Die, Meat Eater, Die. And this one ties into Genlab Alpha, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. So before I start talking about the meta plot, I'm going to talk about both games' meta plot, because I have a lack of space all over the place, so I need to move stuff about. There we go. Then we have Genlab Alpha, or Genlab Alpha, which opens up. It's the same content. You have you don't have mutations now. You have animal abilities instead of mutations, but you still have like food, water, and arrows, and specially designed dice and all that. And again, the player's handbook and the GM's handbook. Both of these, all of these versions aren't released as boxes abroad, as far as I know. They are released as big books, probably as thick as this. Probably. This one is about mutated animals, which you might get an idea from when you look at the box. It takes place, I would say, a little bit before Mutant Year Zero, somewhere about that, and it's about mutated animals living in the Paradise Valley, somewhere in the mountains. They are, as you know what it says here on the back, 2278, 19th of January. Time, 3:47 p.m. Animal Trial, 766532413B. Research Subject, Cassius 09, Felis Sapiens. Subject is terminated expires on the operating table. Remains are sent for catalogization. After the Great Catastrophe, humans retreated to enclaves deep beneath the ground. In genetical laboratories, they tried to create a new creature, a blend between human and animal DNA. Intelligent, but tough enough to survive the new world above. The end had reached the humans, and the enclaves fell. The animal mutants' fight for freedom has begun. So that's it. You actually play an animal mutant who lives within the valley, and the valley is controlled by very murderous robots that keep everybody within the valley. Anybody trying to leave will get killed. And a little bit now and again, a few animals are abducted by these robots. Some return, but they are changed. Some never return at all. So it seems like there's a mad intelligence, robot intelligence, or maybe even human, that control the valley and keeps the animals in check. The animals on their hand, on the other side, they are trying now, which is the entire start of the game, is they are starting to rebel against the machines. And the rest of that information would be discussing meta plot, so I can't talk about that right now. This one takes place after the end of the meta plot here. It follows what happens to the Rubbits. Well, yes, because in the valley there are 6 or 7 specific clans or tribes of animals, which is like the canids, which are the wolves and the foxes, and the dogs are like one group. You have the bears are one group. Mice and rats are one, the cats, and so forth. And the rabbits and the hares are followed up in this one. Rather, the rabbits. The rabbits, they become like crazy and militarized, and as I talked about previously, there were the Rubbits, and this like the origin story of the Rubbits. And they hate everybody who eats meat. There's also an interesting follow-up to what happened to everybody after the Genlab Alpha, and it creates a hub called the Black Hands Bar, where you basically becomes an adventuring hub, and it's not very well written in that respect, because how many times have we all sat down in an inn to find an adventure? That's the opening to every single early role-playing game, so not too well written. But it's still kind of cool that they followed up, like, what happened to all these characters. They have also released Mechatron, but I don't own Mechatron. I don't own Elysium either, so perhaps in the future, whenever I actually get my hands on them, I might make a video of them too. Mechatron, for those who don't know, is the same kind of like adventuring module. These are like their own games in their own respect, but they fall into the Mutant Year Zero game line. So, Mechatron is about the robots who live in, is it like the robot collective of Helium, I think it's called? And Elysium, you play as unmutated humans in the enclaves. And after I've discussed the metaplot, we're going to talk about some more things. So now, I want to warn everybody that we're going to have a really spoilerific time when I start talking about metaplot. You have been warned. Now, the game's meta, simply put, I don't like it. And I'm going to tell you guys why. I kind of like it, but I don't like it. The reason why is that the meta plot, which was a problem in the previous edition too, is that the game has an end. It does. And I don't like that. Role-playing games are not supposed to end. So, when you have your main campaign stop and like tie everything up, what's the point of continue playing? It's not fun, and especially in the main game Mutant Year Zero, it doesn't have a good ending to me. It's an interesting ending, it's a cool ending, and I would say it's quite original in its own respect. So, and it's explained in Chapter 8 in the rulebook, which it says here, The Road to Eden. So, what happened? Well, humanity tried to find several ways to be able to survive above ground after the great catastrophe, both the plague and the nuclear war. What they did was that they needed to prepare the Earth, or maybe even find a species, well, either to alter themselves or find a species that could continue the human race in one way or another. So they started experimenting, and they created the mutated humans. In Eden 1, the Eden 1 project was failed and it never came to fruition. And then in Eden 2, they managed to get it to work. The problem was that the scientists became a little bit too attached to their research subjects, because whenever the subject didn't fit within the optimum parameters, it was killed, quite simply. And we're talking about maybe 4 or 5-year-old kids that they were experimenting on and killing. So I can understand that. So what happened, there's a rebellion, and the scientists take the group of small, different sized children and walk out into the zones. And that's how we got the Ark. So the oldest within the Ark is actually one of the scientists. And because the project was supposed... Right, that's how I forgot. The project was supposed to be terminated because it wasn't feasible. It didn't work properly. And that's also why they can't have kids, because they were sterilized. So they can't mate with each other, because the mutations weren't... They were spontaneous, they weren't under control. So there were all these mad powers that just suddenly showed up and things like that. So that's what, like a safety they put in. But a mutant and an unmutated human can actually have children, as an example. So finding Eden is actually the entire object of the game. That's the only thing you're supposed to do. And when you find Eden, because this is very free, it's up to you, and there's a long road with meta things, and here is where they actually find out the information when they come into the Mimer Labs, which is home to Project Eden, where they'll meet they'll meet Dr. Retzius, which is the main scientist. She is the main scientist of the entire Eden project, and she has gone loopy. She's been alone for the past 25 years. She's an old woman, and she will try anything to get her way out of the things that she wants, which can be like, yeah, I love you guys, I want to make everything work, and then she tries to kill them. There is also a space rocket within the base, which would, if started, Retzius will try to escape by activating the space rocket to get back to their own enclave, which is actually in orbit around Earth. And I thought that was a really cool idea, because in the previous editions, everything in space was destroyed, most usually, is how they talk about it. I'm just trying to find that information here. There were 3 titanic powers by the end at the last World War. After it is Noatun, Mimer, and Elysium. Elysium is the home of the unmutated humans that they even have, like, the motto is the motto of the executioner family who become emperors of the Piri Samfundet. Mimer is circling around Earth, and so if they manage to stop Retzius, they can choose to either, like, fuck it, we'll just go back home, we found the information, we'll just go back, we'll eke out a living and probably die miserably, or we can enter the rocket and go into space and see what happens. And that's where the end is. That's it. The end. There's some additional information that, well, this could happen afterwards. Mutate the Hydra. The plague comes back. Let's see now. There's some examples. The beginning kingdoms, if you want it to be there. The humans arrive and they start to create their own kingdom. So on. So there's some ideas, but I don't like how it ended, because what if your characters decided to board the rocket? Well, that's it. Game over, man. That's it. You have nothing else. And it even says so in the supplement. It's like, well, the game is over. If you want to continue, they can play characters from the Ark, just roll up new characters and continue from there. But the meta plot is over. There's nothing else. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because I'm also going to talk about the Genlab Alpha meta plot, which I like way more. It's really fun, and it's put into sections and chapters for different parts. I think the entire rebellion takes like 1.5 years, and you have plenty of things you can do in between them, and you have like the main meta plot. And what it says is that, yeah, the robots are there, they are performing experiments on them, but they have found out, they saw that there were humans outside. Humans are mythological creatures in this game, in this version of the game. And it has made the animals start to disbelieve the robots, because they are awaiting the return of the humans. The truth behind the labyrinth, where they bring people, the animals, to be dissected and experimented upon, is that it's run by a mad AI. Well, it's not an AI. It's one of the humans from one of the enclaves, at the end of everything, decided to surgically remove her brain. Again, it's a she. The bad guy is a she again. She removed her brain and kind of like connected it to a computer, so it's a supercomputer with a human mind. It's not original in itself, but it's a cool idea. The problem was that it wasn't done properly, so her brain kind of degraded a bit and she became crazy. The robots, they don't really see a difference, because they just follow the orders. So the entire thing is to fight against it, and it's a big intrigue game with, like, you have to find the spies that are loyal to the robots, make sure that you can survive everything, and so on. And the robots have their own way of controlling the animals, like making them sleeper spies. There's an entire tribe of dogs, for example, who are favored by the robots, and they are given plenty of food to keep them informed of any disloyalty within the ranks and so on. So it's a really cool one. And also the problem is that it ends when the revolution is over, provided the revolution succeeds. Even if it fails, it's game over. But provided that the characters finish and do all that, they will move away from the mountains and walk through the world and end up in Mutant Year Zero, which I think is probably the end of the other metaplots. It's probably going to be the same for Mechatron and Elysium. Elysium is probably coming within a year or so to in English. Wouldn't be surprised. So that's the metaplots there, and there are continuations. There has been talk about it for a long time. I know that my friend Lars is working with the Free League right now to draw images for an upcoming edition. I'm waiting for the Kickstarter for that one. But they've also shown a bit of a preview of the next one, which is a follow-up to the meta story of Mutant Year Zero, which is Mutant Year Zero Ad Astra, which takes place in space, which will be then a follow-up to the meta plot in this game. There's also going to be, but I think Ad Astra will probably be translated into English, most likely. But the other one that I'm the most interested in is going to be called Mutant Year Zero Hindenburg, which will kind of conjoin this edition with the previous edition. So they take the information from the previous edition and then crank the time forward, they move time forward by 10 or 20 years. So I'm really looking forward to that one. So to summarize everything, this game, as a role-playing game, is really good. I do enjoy the new rules. It's very versatile, but I prefer the BRP rules. They have a translation system, so you can actually transfer these rules over to BRP if you want to. Long live the BRP. But the reason is that, I mean, since first edition to the previous edition, that is like 30 years of history of using the same rule set, and then they just change it. Still, this one is more versatile due to the fact that it uses a more freeform storytelling due to the rules. And there's plenty of adventure seeds and ideas like that. But that's also the thing, is adventure seeds, not complete adventures. Again, it gives you a lot of freedom to create your own adventure and adventure environment, but I miss having the proper adventure modules. Both, like in Dungeons & Dragons, you have the book. And this is the book. You have information of the campaign, and then you have the adventures with additional seeds that you can put into the game to spice it up. But here is only the adventure seeds and the meta plot, which I didn't like too much. Still, it's a cool meta plot, but I don't like the fact that the game might end. Still, it's definitely worth it. There was I don't like, for example, these specialist cards. They are kind of pointless. It's just like, at the bottom is a mutation card, and here is just like the information about the specific mutation. So they are not essential for the game. I don't also this is popular right now, is to have the specialized dice to your game. They look really cool, but they don't serve a purpose, because you can use a normal D6 or a D20 or a D100, D10, whatever. So I feel they are a bit unnecessary. But that's just my opinion. Still, it's definitely worth a chance. And if you like any kind of post-apocalyptic games, definitely check this one out. If you don't like animal mutants, you don't need to use them, because it's your game world. And you need to have a supplement, which is, again, Genlab Alpha, to actually use mutated animals. You can use mutated animals, but they might not be intelligent within your setting. So that's up to you. And that's something I saw many people write about. It's like, I don't like the idea of furries in my game. Come on, dude. They're not furries. They're just mutated animals who happen to be intelligent. That's all. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this on our road to Eden. I'm going to... Well, no, never mind. I've already talked about possible follow-ups. So I might actually do another video whenever I get my hands on other supplements to the game. But that's it. So thank you guys for joining me on this epic journey through role-playing game history of Mutant, from the first edition to the current edition. I hope you guys enjoyed it. With that, I'm going to sign off. Do leave a like and a comment. Let's discuss this, because it's a fun game. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.